the very first date and rescheduled with us. Thank you for being flexible. It was sort of a fluke snowstorm that made us change dates, but it just worked out beautifully that we were able to collaborate between our two SPRAs, and I hope this is the first of many collaborations between OSPRA and INSPRA, and also just among other SPRAs. This virtual world that we live in allows us to reach farther and wider for areas of expertise and for people to share their experiences. So I want to thank our sponsor for today, Class Intercom. And I believe if Dr. Jill Johnson isn't here, she may be joining us later to tell us a little more about how we can empower all of our students and our staff to help us tell our stories. So we're excited to hear a little more from them. But first, I want to introduce our speakers for today. I had the privilege of meeting Janet Mann at an NSPRA conference a few years ago, and she is a true PR professional in every sense of the word. I learn more just by being in her vicinity than by anything else. And she's joined by Dr. Scott Robertson, her former superintendent. So Janet and Dr. Robertson are going to speak to us today about superintendent transitions, which is a growing, trending topic, at least in Ohio, I'm guessing also in Indiana. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Janet, and then she is going to tell us more about Dr. Robinson. Janet is Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for Zionsville Community Schools in Zionsville, Indiana. Zionsville serves nearly 8,000 students and is one of the highest performing school districts in the state. So with more than 25 years in marketing, communications, and advertising, the last 10 spent in education, Janet has a passion for creating and telling a story that builds unwavering support among stakeholders. Janet believes that a strategic and systematic approach to marketing and communications, coupled with a focus on human connection, will elevate public education. And I think you're going to see a lot of really good examples of that human connection in her presentation today. Janet is married and has 3 children, 2 daughters in college and a son in high school. So every time I think I'm too busy to do things, I look at her and I say, I have no excuses. And I'm going to let Janet take it over. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and letting us steal all of your great ideas.
So before I switch to, apparently I've not done this type of presenting before where I will not be able to see you, which makes me incredibly nervous. So I have my recently retired superintendent, Dr. Scott Robinson, with me. He spent 17 years as the superintendent of Zionsville Community Schools, but 40, maybe a little more than 40 in public, 41 in public education. So I'm serving all sorts of different roles. So he, I'm sure, is very happy to be retired, and I am very thankful he is joining me today. So
Janet, before you share your presentation, I forgot to mention, put your questions in the chat. Since Janet can't see us, we'll monitor the chat and we'll interrupt her just like I did now to let her know when you all have questions.
And I don't want to be just a talking head. So, and I'll try not to, just so you know, before I get started and before I flip out, in my presentation, which we'll put a link to in the chat, and you can take each of the images links to examples of work, so that if you're going through a transition in the future and you just want ideas, you can do that. But there wouldn't be time at all to go through all of that in a 1-hour discussion. So it's there. The other thing is, Scott, I won't be able to see you, so chime in when you can help me out, because I won't be able to see anyone. So I'm going to go to my presentation and get started. So, okay, let's see. Can you see it now? Oh,
yep.
Okay. So when Alicia contacted me, she said that she wanted to talk about superintendent succession planning and communication, which I think is a wonderful topic. I know that we've seen a lot of, retirements. Public education has been a little bit difficult in the last few years. And so, and succession planning has become more popular. It's getting someone ready to take on that role. So perhaps you're elevating someone in the district who is already in the district. So basically there are 2 scenarios. I'll touch briefly on the second, or briefly on the first, and more on the second. But I see superintendent transition as two different ways. You have an incoming superintendent who is new to the community, and you have a superintendent succession plan, which is preparing and elevating an internal leader. So two different transition types. In scenario one, you have a superintendent who is new to the community, and the show must go on with a completely new director. And it's really important in that scenario to hit the right notes. So in my first district, I've done it both ways. In my first district, it was a suburban Indianapolis school district who hired an urban leader from a very large district who was new to the superintendent. So two very vastly different communities. So it became kind of like a puzzle, making the pieces fit. The community that she was coming to was upper middle class, multi-generational families, a growing community with a desire to stay small, not culturally diverse, but with a very strong community pride and also very hesitant about change. Many of the staff who live in the community have kids in the schools, and there's an expectation that they know the superintendent. So in that district, there were 5 schools and an enrollment of approximately 3,400 kids. So the leader that was coming into that district was coming in from a district that served 16,500 students, very diverse, lots of processes and layers of staff before you get to the superintendent. So there was a lot of process management, but the superintendent wasn't always as easily accessible to the community. So part of that was helping her understand how to move into a community the size of ours. And a lot of that was done through storytelling because there was a need to bridge the gap. We had to do that by creating transparency and trust because of internal and external hesitation. So trust was the number one factor in that planning that we had to look at. We used a lot of different vehicles for that. We did the formal press release, the internal email messaging, the newsletters, the video messaging. We created a superintendent hub on the website. But most of all, and what was most important for her, was to begin showing those building interactions and social spaces, creating that warmth and interest, and doing that through stories. And we did a lot of encouraging of the spirit of community, tried to get her out into the community, and then slowly began to introduce her vision and leadership style and establish that trust. As a communicator in a situation like that, the number one priority was helping the community know the new superintendent while creating a roadmap to guide our integration into the community. So in that case, humanness and connection were the key. And that took repeated showing her in that way over and over and over again. Saying it just wasn't the same as showing. One of the first things we did with her was a bedtime story, and instantly it sort of won over. It was for kindergartners the night before kindergarten. We had her read a bedtime story, and it won over. People saw a very warm feel to her. So in a transition timeline like that, just so that you have something to reference, I broke it down into the first 30 days, the next 90 days, and what went on in the summer. So the first 30 days were the public notices for hiring, the board action, and the interviewing. The superintendent was named. The superintendent was named at the board meeting, and then the press release was ready, and we pushed send before ever leaving that room on who'd been hired. There was a bio instantly that evening uploaded to the website, and her formal photograph was ready. And we started on that video and written message work internally and externally. I will say we went internal before external. Always go internal before you go external. The next 90 days, which kind of was through that summertime, was to educate her about the community. Prepared a packet with her about the key leader names, the contact information, the district information, took her on a tour of all the buildings, and introduced her through these coffee talks. She was a little bit more hesitant about public. It was a little harder to get her out and about. It just was a comfort zone thing, but we did it, and she did a great job. During the summer, then, we focused on the back to school marketing pieces, highlighting her introduction as we started the school year, included her in the guides, and opening of school in that district was a huge deal. In fact, a lot of the things that were done at opening school were shared with the community. And so we did a lot of promoting about her vision and what she was looking forward to in the year to come. So the first semester of that school year was entirely community building, both internal and external. She talked with staff, met with community members, met with leaders, went to chamber meetings, got to know the religious leaders, and safety was a big issue then. That was becoming, knowing your safety partners and what is your safety plan. Then we started on the vision rollout, and we started sharing that vision with district leaders, teachers, and staff based on learning observations and the research that we did. We shared a vision for moving forward publicly, and we did that as a slow build, and shared her vision via video message. And that didn't mean she was always saying what her vision was. It was showing her executing the vision and showing what it was going to be like. After the first year, basically you recap and reset for the second year and keep the momentum going. And I think showing the superintendent in the buildings and with people around the community and at all events is key to integrating them into your community and showing that the leader understands the community. We used a lot of social media during that time, and I always went back to first impressions matter most. And so it was really important to get her off on a good foot. So scenario 2.
Janet, before you go on to scenario 2, I think that timeline is so important, and I think that's going to be really helpful for everyone. Do you have any suggestions for people who maybe their superintendent really is shy or sort of an introvert, how to sort of arm them with the confidence to get out there and really put themselves out there to the public?
So I had to, so in my former superintendents from the other district, from her, she was probably about as shy as they get for going into the community and feeling comfortable being shown on video and talking. And part of that was coaching her on the kinds of stories that you want to tell. I think as a communicator, if you can come up with the stories and sell the story and the ideas and the concept, then in her case, put her in the car and say, we're going. You're going to serve lunch today at Brandywine, whether you went to or not. And the more she did that, the more comfortable she became. And she became more friendly with people. It was very rigid at the beginning. So I think as a communicator, you just have to keep going. And sometimes in that case, communications is very, very important because you are the lifeline into the community. When I left there, I would like to believe it was difficult. I'm speaking from one person's opinion, which is mine, but I had kind of taken her with me everywhere. I was kind of in on everything. You're sort of responsible for introducing them to people. And I lived in the community. I had kids in the community. So it's just taking charge and going.
Sure.
Yep.
Could I interject that I love an old Ken DeSiegart line? If you know Ken from the Kansas City area, great school, public relations specialist. He said to me just deadpan one day, buddy, if they don't know you, you are just overhead.
Yeah.
And that resonates with superintendents.
That's excellent. I love that.
That is true. That is true. You want people to know the superintendent and to know the leader. And that's one thing I noticed is that unless you are repeatedly telling stories in your community and showing the superintendent engaged, the community sometimes they don't know if they don't have kids in the district, if the kids are little and they're new to the district, the superintendent isn't always visible. And a communications push has to show that person and who they are, and not just what they're doing, not just the processes that they're running, but the people that they are. And that community feel is so important.
Thanks, Janet. I appreciate that.
So, do you want me to continue?
Go for it.
So then I joined Zionsville and ran into scenario 2 much sooner than I thought I was going to run into scenario 2. So, and that is with the superintendent succession plan. And that is the scenario where someone has been prepared and elevated, and you're communicating about an internal leader who is assuming the superintendency. And while I think that that's maybe not quite as common, it's becoming more and more common because of just the way things have unfolded in recent years. And that is a different beat for communications people. So in Zionsville's case, we had an internal leader who was named the successor in June to take over in February, which was mid-year. So think about that from a communications standpoint. You have a new superintendent named in June, but she doesn't really take charge until February. So from June to February, you have to elevate the leader who's going to be taking the reins, and you have to remember to show the leader that is still leading. So that is kind of a dance. In her case, she had gone through the district as a teacher, a principal, a central office leader, an assistant superintendent, associate superintendent, successor superintendent, and now the superintendent. So no question, very, very qualified. And that one went really, really well. I would say the succession went really well because Dr. Robinson is so well liked in Zionsville too. So it was a combination of her being an amazing person to take the lead and an amazing person who's passing the baton. So in a perfect world, that did go very, very well. And I will tell you that as a communicator, so I want to step out. I have to be careful because, my superintendent's on this, my former superintendent's on this call. But as a communicator, there are wins and challenges with both. In scenario 1, you are in control because, in my opinion, I kind of like control. I know the community, I know the people, I know what she needs to do. She needs me because she doesn't know anybody and she's coming from across the city. Scenario 2, I don't live in the district. I don't have kids in the district. I've worked in the district for 6 years, but I'm elevating a leader who has children in the district, who's been in the district many, many years, who's well established and has a long line of connections in the district. So that's a challenge too from a communication standpoint and making sure that you feel confident in what you're doing. So when you look at making the pieces fit in this scenario, I kind of go back to telling you a little bit about this community. So Zionsville is a rapidly growing community that is feeling growing pains. They named a new leader after some of the most contentious times in the history of public education. So not only are you going through a long transition, but you're doing it on the heels of a very contentious time. The new leader lives in the district, as we talked about, has relationships. There are 9 schools and approximately 8,000 kids. She is a very well-liked member of the community, so it has gone about as well as it can. The outgoing leader is a 41-year educator, the last 17 in Zionsville, well-liked and respected, and basically an internal and external, I call him hero, but he did live those last couple years through a community divide about COVID-19 and politics. There were heated board meetings, vocal small pockets of people who wanted things a certain way. And not only did we then name the transition, I think that was strategically done, and Scott can talk about that, but the leader was named in June, and then obviously we had a board election. So you had the board election. We did really well in the board election, and she has a very good board. That could have gone, who knows how that could have gone, but she has a very good board. Do you want to add anything about that part of it, Scott? Or
yeah, I think that we have all seen various styles of leadership in the superintendency, and I was quite familiar with folks who were slightly elder to my small group of contemporaries coming to the superintendency because there were far fewer of them, because these autocrats tended to hang on forever. And so when I was coming through chairs in central office and in various places, it was difficult to find a superintendency, and I was more and I don't mean to flatter myself here, and Janet can debunk anything that is a lie here, but I was interested in collaboration and less of the selfish mindset about what happens to the district once I'm gone. This is a mission for me, and I wanted to make sure that the stability we had built coming out of abject poverty of integrity when I arrived in 2006. In fact, the sexual harassment of my predecessor is apparently still studied by attorneys throughout the Midwest as, you know, the classic sign of what not to do, the HR failure. So we did establish integrity. We did establish a great team, and I wanted that to move forward. So in December of 21, silently to my board, I said, do you know what's happening in the superintendency? 51 openings last year. Becky Kaufman is a blue chip candidate. She's going to get 19 to 25 offers. I need you to think about succession planning because I turned 65 in January of 2023. It's in our faces, and we have a contentious board election coming in the fall of 22. So how about we get this done? If you interview Becky, I know it's not my call, I'm staff, but I think you really need to look at her very carefully as someone who could foster continuity, yet with new eyes and a new vision and an entirely different, in fact, the first female CEO in this community, which is a huge, important thing. Now, I know that's calling a gender. She's way more qualified than I ever was, irrespective of gender, but it was a heavy lift in many ways. And so when it occurred first in May on the public space, in the public space, Jenna did a beautiful job of setting that up. We heard crickets. And I think most folks were thinking about CRT. They were thinking about suing us over masks, and all those things were still the residue. But in the community, Becky Kaufman was the perfect choice in their minds. And so, and I don't want to steal your thunder, Janet, but we did move through, and I was thinking as superintendent, do foreshadow, act, and, you know, protect and have all your strategies. Janet had us in 3 or 4 different lanes of responding to things that could have happened. They didn't. We were blessed with an election. It gives Becky 4 years with a team of board members who are interested in what? Amazing children. So that's sort of, I mean, I knew long in advance we were going to try to play all these cards so that it wouldn't be a contentious element of the election, and it was not.
Dr. Robinson, can I ask you, how early did Janet know? Like you said quietly to the board, and this is what I think you should do. At what point did you feel comfortable bringing Janet in and having her part of the plan?
Well, I always felt comfortable bringing Janet in anytime she was the vault, has great school PR people. You know that. I'm preaching to the choir here. I think it was January, February when we were thinking out loud with Becky about how do we play this? Who are the set pieces, you know, for Becky's eventual central office? And by the way, we did a reconfig in 21 December when I first announced. And I went to Becky and said, look, this is what's going to happen. You've already disclosed you want to be the superintendent. So let's play all of these cards correctly. I want you to set up who is in central office. She made those choices. I obviously was there to talk about, you know, pros and cons, but it just played out perfectly. And now she essentially has her team in place to move forward. So Janet was involved in January, February. We first announced board did interviews in March. And then we were set with every piece of communication and all those lanes for the eventualities by early May when they had to announce to the public based on Indiana law.
Great. Thank you.
That's one thing I've been very fortunate of here. And I would say to try to have that same seat at the table in your district is one of the hardest things to do as a communicator is to communicate that which you don't know. So trying to be on those front end and, for lack of a better word, pushing your way in to making sure you're part of that inside track of what's going to be happening so that you can prepare. It's kind of part of that having a cabinet seat at the table so that you can understand and prepare. It will make your job so much easier. So if you're not in that position, I would say lobby for yourself. I think many of us are now. A lot of this is changing in school communications, and the role itself has become far more valued than it was in years past because of the desperate need for it. And so I would say always lobby for that. So I've been very fortunate here and been able to be on those front end of decisions. But again, this bridge was a little bit more difficult for me because I did have to figure out, and I'm still figuring out, that takes time. What is your place when you're the communications lead, but you're leading for someone who has a lot of connections? And so I place a lot of value in storytelling. Well, I had to sort of go back to the table and think to myself, this is no different. This is exactly what we've done before. It's just I'm very, very fortunate. I have someone who is already in a great position with the community. So my job is now to keep that position where it is. And it was a kind of a dance doing it for several months with 2 people in place. So kind of when we go back to the community piece of it, not the logics of how it unfolded, but the community part of it, I had to look at 2. This wasn't a launch at the start of the school year communications wise. It's in the middle of the year. And it's at the middle of a year when it's a kind of a stressful time for staff, when they're going into that second semester and there's testing and there are all sorts of responsibilities on them. So we sort of had to look at that and say, what is the best way to do this transition? And we decided on kind of a subtle approach in that, Becky, the day that she took her, so we did a lot of transitioning of Dr. Robinson out of the district, which I'll get into, but bringing her in, we went through simple email messaging, put things in newsletters, video messaging in terms of what her vision and mission are will probably be reserved for the start of the school year. Once we send our back to school pieces, we do a big marketing piece in the summer. We'll do some polling probably ahead of that. We'll work on a superintendent hub on the website, but right now we focused on showing continuity. We're still moving forward. We've transitioned leaders, but we're still going in the right direction. And so my push with her has been getting those interactions of her in social spaces, going back to the community, and then we'll slowly introduce her vision and establish trust. And we felt like that probably reduces the stress for staff most of all, because they're the ones that are most impacted by change ultimately. So this is kind of my graphic and my thought process of how to break everything down. You have to look at the introduction plan, what the strategy will be internally, and then once you've determined your internal strategy, what are you going to do externally to bring the community on board? I looked at timing. What happens when change for me wasn't at the start of a school year? That was a really tough one to have to go back and think about. And how do you overlap those months? And then one thing I've thought a lot about, and this is even from a central, here it's in my other district, it's called central office, but the Education Service Center, is that how do you begin to establish a new superintendent who has come up through the district, through different positions, as the superintendent now, the superintendent expectations, and how do those relationships change for her? And what do we need to do to her, for her, communications wise, to be sure that we, change the way that perception is. And then we have to plan for the future. So a mid-year transition, that was a big focus this time. And then my communications lens was looking at how to sell my plan differently to her when she has all of the experience inside the district. It's just been a balancing act, and we figure it out as we go. So this timeline really isn't a lot different, other than it started mid-year instead of the beginning of the year. We started updating websites. We looked at all of our internal communications pieces that had Dr. Robinson's name on it and started switching those over. Make sure to have her in buildings. The day one that she took over was Global Day of Play. And we had her in buildings playing with the kids and showed her and put that on social media. And one of the first comments was exactly what you should be doing on your first day. So I thought we kind of hit the mark with that. We've started to plan for the start of year materials and what that'll look like with a new leader. And I'll show you sort of what we did last summer. I know I have to go quick. I'm looking at my clock. And we just will continue to transition with new leader expectations. And I will meet with her as a communicator regularly to understand her needs, understanding that her needs will be different than my previous superintendent. It's no different than any other career change, or leadership change, but you have to be in tune with that. She will begin, or has already started, her listening tours in buildings where she's meeting with staff and just talking with them. And then we've just now started promoting her coffee talks in the community, which I think one thing that she has done, which is really interesting, is really good. She's kept her talks small. So she will have 3 people in each one. And that was done intentionally so that people feel like they can talk and they can say something. Because sometimes when people get in big groups, they don't speak up as much. And so she's kept it small. And it also will keep, we do still have some dissenters in terms of different programming and different things that go on. So we just have to be very careful about that. And everything we do, we're doing slow. So during the summer, it'll all be focused on a new year, a new leader, continuing all the introductions, making sure everything's updated, and starting to plan for photo ops. So again, it goes back to that community and the vision and the recap. So you just kind of continue all of that. So once she's in place and the year has started, she can begin to talk about her vision. And we will ask our community at some point. We'll go to our community and ask them what they would like to see or what's going well, what maybe could be done differently. So there will be some information gathering for that. Timing, I cannot say that. I know I've said it several times, but a mid-year change it's a lot. And so you just have to be prepared for that. And then again, for your communications, you have to know that your leaders are going to be different and your approach may have to change to meet their styles so that everyone is comfortable. And I will begin to strategize with her on priorities and to ensure that they align with her vision for my work as well. So, and I think from I don't know what you call it, like a humanness perspective, one thing I've learned going through 2 transitions, 2 completely different, is that you don't really understand how your workflow will be affected or what the arrangement will feel like for about 6 to 12 months. I think you have to let yourself get into for somebody like me, I hate change. And so it's funny that my career has been built on a lot of change. And so everybody just needs time to adjust. And there will be bumps. There will be little bumps along the road. There's always a honeymoon period for the new leader. And we all just have to be patient because everybody's transitioning.
Janet, before you move on, a couple of questions. Can you touch briefly, just tell us what the Superintendent Hub is? I was curious about that too, and someone else asked.
So I have not put that out here, but we'll have a welcome page for her and then begin to share her vision. So we do some print pieces in the summer. We do a lot of digital pieces. And so that website will begin to be built throughout the summer where it will have, her introduction and her vision, but then also links to pieces and things that she's been in. Basically just, what do you call calling? Just kind of a here's who she is.
Okay. So we should, we should keep an eye on your website as you build that out.
Yeah, it's not. So one of the things that she is very particular about is that we don't introduce a lot right in the middle of the school year. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of working on all of that in the background. So I can kind of tell you leading up to then, but he just retired February 1st. And so, we had the announcements ready and we had all of the different things in order for that. But now we've got to do the building for the future. So, yeah.
A couple others. One of the questions was, how do I insert myself into the cabinet role when my role is still being established? And I don't know, Dr. Robinson, you have a good lens of this. If you have a new communications person, what can they do to really show that value?
Well, I think that it is largely dependent upon the style of the leader in terms of what you'll find as a communications professional. Personally, I needed to be told because I was busy and I only have one set of perceivers right here. And so I hired people I trusted implicitly, and I tried to get out of the way and let them do their work. But communications really had been my chief, not my chief role, but I had chiefly been the person who did communications as we were searching for Janet. And so I think if you're in that situation where you're just outside the door, use your best EQ to deliver the following message. And obviously you'll have to clean it up in semantics and in deference to whatever. I mean, if you have an autocrat, you're really going to have to pussyfoot around with it. If you have someone like me, you can say, hey, if you don't trust me implicitly, fire me. You hired me. If you thought you hired a gossip, you didn't. I'm a person who wants to communicate and make you look great. How about you let me in? And Janet didn't say that in so many words, but over time, she helped me not be so much of a control freak. And when I saw the beauty of her storytelling, she was a way better storyteller than I was. So we still collaborated right till the very end on some of the writing pieces because I was pretty picky about that. But it has to be a direct collaboration. I think don't whine, but say, here's the fact, you know. I'm a person who can tell this story if you'll let me know the facts. Otherwise, I'm useless to you.
Mm-hmm.
One thing from a communications, that's a very hard thing to do with a leader too. And again, I came from two completely different scenarios, and I would talk to anyone about this, but I had one who was not very comfortable in communications and didn't really want a lot of communications, and one going to one who had always done the communications and had a lot of hand in the communications. And so it was kind of an about face, and that is a learning experience. And I think if you're going to advocate for yourself, I guess, close your ears, superintendents, I don't know, but you kind of have to get a pulse on what's going on in the communities around you as well. And if you can show great things that are happening in neighboring districts and show their level, the level of the person that they're trusting, it's okay to rely on that. And the other thing is, I'm an avid reader. And so I just read a lot of books about how to try to be that person, because I am not by nature overly confident at all. But I know that the only way I can do my job right is if I have all the information. And so there were times when I needed something when it took me months to ask because I just don't have that self-confidence. So if I could tell anyone, be confident, but know what you're asking for too.
Mm-hmm. And then how do you plan to gather feedback from the community?
We are starting through that process right now. We will, Scott, do you want to talk about that? I don't know. We will use some sort of surveying, and we've sort of started that ball rolling, but I don't know. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. So we collaborated with folks in Ohio. Will know
Ohio
with Atherton Hill. And they took us to Paul, his name escapes me, but Paul is a really skilled survey person in communities. And we interviewed him, brought him in, and he is doing, and this was all part of my handoff to Becky to say, you really do need to have a pulse after this election is over, after this transition is over in the spring, when you're looking at, what are the big three or the big five for your families? And so that's going to be operating behind the scene, but Becky has a really elegant plan for getting out dozens, scores of times to engage with people. I did about 215 so-called coffee talks. They were a little bit larger than the ones Becky's doing over my first 14 years, and then we had the pandemic, and those were nixed. So the point is, I had a constant stream of information about what was hot with parents. And so Becky is going to do the same thing, and she and Janet are working through the direct listening tours that she'll do and the structured survey, and then they'll make decisions after that about what information they need to gather. They have a community conversations piece that meets frequently, and they'll continue that as well.
All right,
And
Janet,
I
you
wanna-
have a lot of examples to get through, so I'm going to let
And
you
we
get.
will, and I will actually leave a lot of this and you can look through it, and that's fine. But one thing I do want to say what I did just there, right then. So I kind of knew what we were doing, but again, that's where when you talk about getting into a cabinet level position, I am extremely guarded about ever sharing internal meetings and communication because I have been trained like that for 25 years. You don't share one thing outside of this room. And so I defaulted instantly to who was my leader, who set this up, to sort of throw that back and say, can we talk about that? Again, that's just kind of that's me being overly cautious. But again, when you're trying to work into a cabinet type role, I do think you have to be cognizant of what information sharing you should be doing. So not that that was a big deal, but I use that as an example of just being thoughtful in approach. So, do you want me to go on?
Yep, please do. We have about 10 more minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, we're going to go quick. I'm not going to go through all this. So I will tell you, instead of going through all of this, because you can go back and click on these things, I have included a lot of our communications pieces, and you see screenshots on the screen, but you can actually click on those. You'll have the link and it will go to the actual piece that released. I use a storytelling platform called Shorthand, which allows me to do stories and then group them by story nature. So I'm able to, at the end, you'll see I've grouped a lot of my transition pieces that were done in this program into one place where you can look at them. But I use that program for almost all of my digital storytelling. So again, we announced the succession plan in May, and this is a recap of the board meeting where we did that. This was a strategic piece that we put out at the beginning of this school year. So she was officially named in June. In July, we put out this marketing piece. And again, you'll see they're both in this marketing piece. Scott had the lead message, retiring in February. Becky took the strategic piece because she will be carrying the strategy forward. So that's a way to balance when you have two leaders and you have a successor coming in, is to begin to transition subtly that role to the future person. So that was our summer. We also included that in our digital piece. Then as we went on, we have a community newsletter called the eNexus, which goes quarterly. And I had her at some of our big events. I started showing her as the face on a lot of things. We had our new teacher academy in August that involved both leaders. You can go back and look at that reel. It's more important that we talk than I show off our materials. These are simply here for idea starters. Opening day, both did opening day, leading up to a mid-year change. Eagle Fest is our biggest, I would say our largest community event. Both leaders in attendance. I've always filmed Scott there and always made that a community splash for him. Again, we showed that's a video piece. You can look at that. We had our State of the Schools in September, which was prior to that February. Both leaders presented at State of the Schools. Again, signaling that change is coming. And he was so well liked and she's so well liked, it made for a very easy transition. And then we began showing her in the classroom. So we wanted to get her down to the level of being with the students and showing her engaging in classrooms. I mean, she's a teacher, of course, by trade, so that's easy to do, but it was just showing that repeatedly. And a lot of these also link to Smug Mugs. I take a ton of pictures. And so because I think pictures sometimes tell the story a lot better. So you can look at any of the pictures. This we began 30 days out. It was just a fun, again, you can look at that video. It was meant to be a fun piece where Scott began to introduce her and talked about, okay, we are 30 days out from transition. And again, she's at all the events, and all of these are just pieces that you can look at. You can click to anything on these. And I'm sorry, there's so much here. Did not gauge my time too well. We also have an internal newsletter called The Insider, and Scott writes a message. It runs every 2 weeks, coinciding with payday. And Scott always wrote the lead message in that. He began to pass that baton little by little in each message until the final one. So I've got some of those for you. And then we did the public board meeting where it was a transition, almost like a transition publication. It was accolades to Scott, passing the baton on to her. And then we started on the retirement piece. And then as he retired, one of the most popular pieces was he reflected on 10 things over his career or his career in Zionsville that stand out. And one was his succession plan, again, reinforcing that we have a great leader coming on board and we are ready to go. And he did a very, very good job of saying that. So there's a publication on one of those and there's a video on another. Towards, I think it was his last day, right, Scott? Was it your last day? We have staff.
And my birthday.
And what?
Yeah, it was my birthday as well as my last
And his
day.
birthday, that's right. We have a program called Above and Beyond, and people nominate staff for going above and beyond their role and doing great things. It's a program that really took off here that I was very excited about. And we have a prize. It's called. They go around and award money maybe once a quarter. They draw names out of a hat and 10 people win $50. It's through donors. It's not through school money. But for that very last one, we took both of them because that is a day that we're in every school building and interacting with teachers. And it showed them again, passing the baton. I mean, the last day. And so it served two purposes. Everyone got to say goodbye to Scott and hello to Becky. I mean, you can't get better than that. And then our last piece was Fun Fluff, and we did a retired piece. And you can look at that video where he symbolically pulls out of town and hands off the keys to her and she walks into the building, and that's it. And then we go into, that was day one, Global Play Day. So we went straight from that piece right into Here We Go. And she's been in schools. And so all of those are pieces that you can look at, showed her. We did a video and photography at different events around the district so far. So any of those you can look at. Social media is huge. I'll go back to that. Of course, not everyone's on social media, but that is a great place to tell your story, to reach outside of your walls. And so those are just 3 examples, but we put stuff on social media all the time. And she started her coffee and conversation dates. So we began, there's a publication linked to this. We began advertising that we put a weekly publication out every Friday called the Friday 5. And we highlight 5 things that are going on in the district that are fun or of interest. And so the link went out to start signing up for that. And you can see that's a clip on the other side with the dates that have school names of the listening tours and the different times she's in different buildings to talk to teachers. So I guess I'll do my little plug for INSPRA and any OSPRA or INSPRA, like all the SPRAs. I did go to her instantly and I asked her if she would do the INSPRA leadership in school communication program with me. I thought maybe we were going to do one with Scott and then a few with her, but it's going to turn out I'm going to do the first one alone and then she's going to do all of the rest of them with me. But I thought that would give us a really great time to work together on strategy, and it would give me time with her and it would give us time to figure out what we want to do moving forward as a team. So I thought that was a good opportunity. I would encourage anyone to do that. And then I instantly invited her to our annual INSPRA conference, which is in March, and asked her if she would mark her calendar for that, because I think it's really, really important for superintendents to understand the Public Relations Association aspect of it and to be a part of our work, because we are a team. That's what we all do together. And so if we can get them involved, it just puts everyone on the same page. So moving forward, we'll do the community polling, the summer communications, the print production, the kickoff, and the implementation plan. And this is my fun slide. This was me at the start of the process, not really me, but the eagle at the start of the process. And this is how I felt when it was completed, but a little hunched over there. For me, this process is as important as a referendum process. And it was that much work. It doesn't seem like it is, but it is, because you're worrying alongside everything. But, in a referendum, you're selling to the community the value of your school district. And through a transition of a superintendent, you're selling a leadership transition. And the vision for the school. So it's really important. So on these, I need to add the video archive. It will be there. I ran out of steam, but the digital story archive on the left, if you click on that picture, there are maybe like 10 or 15 digital stories that are just solely idea starters. My work, every district has different needs and does things differently, but this is the way we did it. And I thought maybe that would be helpful. So that's it. If you have any questions, you can always email me. That's what I have. Are there other questions now? I know we're really close on time.
Alicia, may I talk about Henry's question for a moment?
Yes.
Henry, it's a tremendously important question, particularly in this day. I've always been a firm believer in Administration Rule 101, and that is to not treat an idiot like an idiot. Each community has idiots. They're all dressed up sometimes as folks who seem normal, and they like to scorch people, whether in whatever venue, right, at the board meeting, public microphone, or whatever. My tack has always been to let them hang themselves in their negativity. I don't respond to them directly. Only if we're in personal meetings, or maybe if they accost me in a small group meeting, will I take them on with a firm message that isn't degrading or diminishing of them. They are, and this is a value judgment. I'm the one who thinks they're an idiot. I may be the idiot, but the point is, I know what mission I am forwarding, and I'm going to be Johnny One Note on that message. And then when you can hire a PR professional, and folks, I know you're in the business, so Janet's preaching to her choir here, but folks, do you see the warmth? Do you see the organization? Do you see the way that communications really, what came alive here are the students of our district. And for 17 years, I preached that we exist, we put the doors open for one thing, and that's student growth. And when I get an idiot in whatever venue who is arguing, his latest conspiracy theory from whatever he watched, I go back and talk about student growth. It is disarming every time. It doesn't make his noise go away, but to your point in your question, which is a really important one for a community, you need to have other people in the queue to be siding with you by showing that you're going to talk about student growth. What's important today for your kid? We have that constant torque of batch process with individualization. And when we're talking with a group of 30 parents, we're talking about 30 individuals. They know it, you know it. Let the idiot be the idiot.
Thank you. That's so good to hear, especially from a former leader, still, I'm sure, a leader in your community. So thank you for that perspective. I do want to hand it off to Christina Capretta. Janet, that was amazing. And for anyone who came in late, we'll be sharing that presentation with all the links and all of the resources. You'll be able to click through the whole thing again and see everything that she created. We're all in awe of all of the stuff that you've done. But Christina is going to introduce our sponsor for the day. Thank you, Dr. Jill, for rescheduling your time to spend some time with us. But Christina, if you could just introduce her, that would be amazing.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Capretta, Director of Partnerships for OSPRA and the Director of Marketing and Community Relations for the Berea City School District outside of Cleveland, Ohio. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jill Johnson from Class Intercom. She has served in education for 30 years as a classroom teacher, professional development consultant, assistant principal before moving into her current role as president of Class Intercom. She holds degrees in language arts education, instructional technology, educational administration, and educational leadership. Her passion and research focus on student voice, student-led social media teams, social media management, and content creation in scholastic environments. Welcome to Dr. Jill Johnson.
Thank you, Christina and Alicia. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and what a great presentation from Janet and Scott. As a former teacher and administrator for 30 years, I went through several superintendency transitions, both by design and also some that came one after an arrest even. So a lot of things that go into planning and succession planning. And so really great information. I know we are short on time, but I want to tell you a little bit about Class Intercom. And then I do also have my CEO, Ben Pankin, in here. Ben is an expert in technology. And so he wanted to give you guys a quick update on all the craziness happening with Twitter, which has been a day by day and hour by hour watch for him and our development team here. So just a little bit about Class Intercom though. We are a social media management company. We're designed specifically for schools, and that's who we serve. So when we talk about, Christina mentioned those passions of mine, I love being able to live those out here and serving schools and getting to tell those awesome stories from multiple points of view. We do support Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and allow for an unlimited number of content creators. So that's students, staff, even parents helping tell your story, but through a moderated system. So as a former administrator, I love that I have to hit approve or someone does with those credentials before it goes out. And then we're also really happy that we supply archiving for all of that as well. We know that those Freedom of Information Act requests are growing, as well as state level requests. So we are proud to serve, happy to serve. If you want more information, you can contact me, Jill at classintercom.com or Ben at classintercom.com. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Ben now so he can share with you a little bit about Twitter. And if you have questions for me or Ben, please put those in the chat or reach out to us via email. We're happy to help.
Well, thank you so much, Jill. And you know, Jill's been a fantastic resource for a lot of people in school PR. We were just recently at the President's Summit in Chicago, talking with a lot of school PR professionals about the challenges that are facing all of you in social media and everything else that is so timely. We have to get information out quickly. And one of the questions that's been surfacing is really around Twitter. In a post-Elon Musk world, what do we see in Twitter? What's changed? What sorts of things do we need to be aware of as school PR professionals? And personally, Twitter has been, for many years, my social media platform of choice. I really enjoyed it. I liked the fact that it could be verbal, that I could sort of have written communication, that maybe my photos didn't matter quite as much. There were a lot of things that I really liked about Twitter. But ever since October 27th, when Elon Musk sort of let it sink in at Twitter headquarters, right? He carried a sink into Twitter headquarters, took over. There were a lot of changes that happened pretty rapidly. The first of which made a lot of news. Over 1,000 engineers and other staff were fired at Twitter headquarters. Obviously, in many cases that's alarming. And the way it was done was something that I think a lot of us in the PR world would say, I think there's some more tact we could maybe make in all of this. As an innovator, I think there's some things that we sort of looked at and said, maybe we do need to make adjustments, maybe not. But I, wanted to withhold judgment at that point. Where things got really alarming for Twitter's usage, for those of us who care a lot about safety, and we're in industries like education, where we do have regulated components and other things we have to depend on, where things got really scary were in December of this past year, just 2 months after taking over Twitter. The entire safety council for Twitter was removed. What that really means to us as users of Twitter is that we no longer have humans with governance over Twitter. So, what we have when a post needs to be removed, when an account needs to be removed, when we have to debate on whether or not something is harmful or appropriate on Twitter, those controls really have been largely removed, and the people who are governing that are now not in place. That's really concerning for a platform that we hope to use for education purposes, and that we hope to be free and communicating openly. The other things that have started to change is really in volatility at Twitter. So we're seeing policies removed. This past week, our team was watching a number of policies on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that were changing almost by the hour. And that's very concerning when we see uptime failing, So we're seeing some platforms at Twitter are being pulled down. There are a lot of concerns for us from a safety standpoint of using Twitter, and a lot of concerns when we do have downtime, things like that, because it becomes an unstable platform. So, as we look at it, my hope is that that leadership gets in place, that we start to have some consistency in governance and policy and procedures for all of these platforms, because it really makes it more safe for those of us, conducting PR communications across all of these platforms. So whether that be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, we want all of them to have those sorts of procedures in place that really allow us to do that. We're happy to answer any questions. We do stay up on a lot of these technologies and really want to support schools and the best appropriate practices there.
Well, thanks, Ben. And I'm really, we're always thrilled to be able to support school PR, especially here, Ohio. And then I'm really glad we could blend in with Indiana. We get a lot of snow here at our Class Intercom Global Headquarters in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so we totally understand that and appreciate the opportunity to reschedule and be here, and hope we can continue to support you, maybe meet you in person sometime soon, but always here to help. Classintercom.com also has a ton of resources. Part of our mission is to support all schools, not just our clients. So we hope you can go there to find some guidance on building content creation teams, incorporating more points of view, dealing with the laws governing these types of communications, as well as really telling your stories in an awesome way to highlight your staff and students. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you guys taking the time and sharing your expertise about Twitter. I know it's something that we try to stay up on, but it's your world that you live in. So we're glad you were able to add that to our meeting today. Appreciate it so much.
You're welcome.
So for everybody else on the call, thank you again for rescheduling. For Ohio people, thank you to our Indiana people for letting us jump on this meeting you already had scheduled. Dr. Robertson and Janet, you two are amazing. One question I didn't get to ask you, so just give me a quick yes or no. Did you outsource any of that work? Did you do it all yourself, Janet?
I do it all by myself.
Amazing. She's amazing.
We are in awe of you. So thank you. Again, we'll share out this presentation. You'll have all the links and all the resources. If you have any questions afterwards, you can shoot those to whichever board you belong to. We will get you in contact with the right people and get the information to you. So thank you, and happy Monday. Have a great day. And thanks again to everybody for being here.
Thank you.
All right. I don't know if we can end the call. I can't.
Okay. I don't know. Oh, I don't know what to hit. What do I hit the little, oh yeah. Okay. Well, do I hit leave call?
Yeah.
Okay.